They say a space marine cannot feel doubt, that the Emperor's angels are forged beyond fear, beyond regret, beyond the weakness that makes men human. Captain Demetrian Titus proved them wrong. He saved a forge world, slaughtered thousands of orcs, and faced down a demon prince of chaos. His reward? 2 centuries of torture, 200 years stripped of his armor, his honor, and his name. Now he walks again among the Ultramarines, but something has changed. The question is not who Titus was. The question is, what did those 2 centuries turn him into? My name is Demetrian Titus, and before I became a Primaris Marine, before I crossed the Rubicon, before the Inquisition took everything from me, I was a captain of the Ultramarine 2nd Company. I was a leader of the Emperor's finest, a warrior who had earned his place through blood and faith and centuries of service. I had fought in campaigns whose names would fill this entire script. I had stood on worlds where the ground was made of corpses and the sky rained ash. I had killed in the Emperor's name without question, without hesitation, without mercy. I was what the Imperium needed me to be: a weapon, a symbol, a tool of humanity's survival in a galaxy that wanted nothing more than to devour us all. But I made one mistake. I touched a chaos artifact and survived. That should have killed me. It should have corrupted me, twisted me into something monstrous, turned me into the very thing I had spent my life fighting against. But it did not. I remained pure. My faith held. My will endured. And that was the problem. Because in the Imperium of Man, surviving what should kill you makes you more dangerous than dying from it. Purity that cannot be explained is more terrifying than corruption that can be understood. And so they took me, not the enemy, not the heretics, not the demons I had fought for 200 years. My own brothers, my own Imperium. They took me because I was an anomaly, and anomalies cannot be permitted to exist. The Inquisition does not arrest Space Marines lightly. We are the Emperor's chosen, his angels of death, forged from his own genetic legacy and armed with weapons that could level cities. We are worth more than entire regiments of guardsmen, more valuable than battleships, more irreplaceable than worlds. To take a Space Marine from his chapter, to strip him of his command and drag him into interrogation, requires evidence of heresy so absolute that no doubt can remain. But they did not have that evidence. What they had was suspicion. What they had was fear. What they had was a man who had done the impossible and lived to tell about it. And in the Imperium, that is more than enough. I remember the day they came. We had just returned from Graia, the Forge world where we had stopped the Orc invasion, where we had prevented a chaos incursion that would have claimed billions of lives, where I had personally killed Warlord Grimskull and banished the Demon Prince Nemeroth back to the Warp. We were victorious. We were heroes. The Mechanicus was already preparing commendations. And then Inquisitor Thrax arrived with his retinue and his accusations and his cold, dead eyes that looked at me not as a warrior or a brother, but as a specimen that needed to be dissected and understood. He said I was tainted. He said no man could resist the touch of chaos without being changed by it. He said my resistance proved I had already fallen, that my apparent purity was simply a mask worn by something darker, something patient, something waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. My battle brothers tried to defend me. Sidonus, my closest friend, spoke on my behalf, telling them how I had fought, how I had never wavered, how I had proven my loyalty 1,000 times over. But the Inquisition does not care about loyalty, cares about certainty, and I was anything but certain. They took me in chains, not the ceremonial restraints used for prisoners of war, but actual adamantium shackles designed to hold a Space Marine, bound around my wrists and ankles and throat, connected to a control collar that could deliver enough voltage to drop me if I resisted. I did not resist. I could have killed Thrax and his entire retinue before they reached their transport. I could have fought my way out, disappeared into the underhive, become a renegade, a chapter serf turned outlaw, living in the shadows until the Imperium hunted me down. But that would have proven them right. That would have confirmed their suspicions. And so I went quietly, believing that if I cooperated, if I submitted to their interrogation, if I proved my innocence through patience and faith, they would release me and I could return to my chapter and my duty. I believed the system would work. I believed the truth would set me free. I was wrong. The Inquisition does not seek truth. It seeks confirmation. It takes suspects and turns them into heretics through methods so brutal that eventually everyone confesses to something, anything, just to make the pain stop. But I could not confess, because I was not guilty, because I had touched the chaos artifact and remained pure, because my faith in the Emperor was absolute, and no amount of torture could change that. They took me to a black ship, one of the prison vessels that drift through the Imperium carrying psychers and witches and those accused of crimes so terrible that even speaking their names invites corruption. I was locked in a cell barely large enough to stand, its walls inscribed with holy scripture and psychic wards designed to suppress any taint I might be carrying. I was fed nutrient paste once a day, just enough to keep me alive but not enough to maintain my strength. I was denied sleep through constant noise and light and temperature fluctuations that made rest impossible. And I was interrogated every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days without pause. Questions designed to trap me, to make me contradict myself, to find inconsistencies in my story that could be interpreted as lies or deception or the subtle influence of chaos. I told them everything. I told them about Greya, about the orcs, about Nemeroth, about the power source we had been protecting and how it had been corrupted and how I had destroyed it to prevent chaos from claiming it. I told them about the moment I had touched the artifact, about how it had felt like ice and fire simultaneously, about how I had heard whispers promising power and knowledge and everything I could ever want, and about how I had rejected those whispers through sheer force of will. I told them the truth. But truth is not what the Inquisition wants. They want confessions. They want admissions of guilt. They want you to tell them you are tainted so they can execute you and move on to the next suspect. Time stopped meaning anything. The black ship traveled through the warp, and in the warp, normal physics do not apply. Days could be weeks. Weeks could be minutes. I lost track of how long I had been imprisoned. My augmented memory, designed to recall every battle, every tactical decision, every word of the Codex Astartes, began to fail under the strain of constant interrogation and sleep deprivation. I started to forget things, small details at first, the names of battle brothers I had served with decades ago, the exact coordinates of worlds I had fought on, but then larger things. The sound of Sidonus's voice, the layout of the Ultramarines' fortress monastery, the face of my primarch, Robot Gilliman, whose gene seed I carried in my body. I began to wonder if they were right, if I was tainted, if the artifact had changed me in ways I could not perceive, if my certainty of my own purity was itself a form of corruption, a lie I told myself to avoid facing what I had become. The Inquisition is very good at making you doubt yourself. That is their greatest weapon. Not the torture, not the interrogation, but the slow erosion of confidence, the gradual dismantling of everything you believe about yourself, until you no longer know who you are or what you stand for. And in that moment of doubt, they have you. But I held. I do not know how. Perhaps it was training. Perhaps it was faith. Perhaps it was simply stubbornness, the refusal to give them the satisfaction of breaking me. But I held. I answered their questions. I endured their methods. I maintained my innocence. And eventually they stopped interrogating me. Not because they believed me, but because they realized I would never confess. And if I would never confess, then I had no value as a prisoner. I could not be executed without proof. I could not be released without certainty, and so I entered a kind of limbo, neither condemned nor exonerated, simply existing in a state of perpetual suspicion. They transferred me to a penal world, not a prison planet where criminals serve their sentences, but a Death Watch black site where the Inquisition stores problems they do not know how to solve. The world had no name. It had a designation, a string of numbers and letters that meant nothing to anyone except the administrative clerks who filed the reports. It was a frozen wasteland, its surface scoured by winds that could strip flesh from bone. Its only structures a series of underground facilities where prisoners were kept in isolation. I was assigned to a cell deep beneath the ice, a chamber carved from rock and lined with adamantium, containing nothing except a sleeping platform and a waste receptacle. The door was sealed, the light never changed, and the silence was absolute. I spent decades in that cell. I do not know how many. The Inquisition did not bother to mark time for me. There were no calendars, no clocks, no changes in routine that might have given me a sense of progression. I was fed through a slot in the door at irregular intervals, sometimes twice a day, sometimes once every few days. I suspect they were testing me, seeing how long I could survive without food, measuring my resilience, gathering data on space marine physiology under extreme conditions. I exercised to maintain my strength. I recited the Codex Astartes to maintain my mind. I prayed to the Emperor to maintain my faith. And I waited. The isolation was worse than the torture. At least during interrogation, I had something to focus on, someone to argue with, a purpose however twisted. But in the cell there was nothing. No stimulation, no interaction, no confirmation that I still existed beyond the walls of that chamber. I began to lose my sense of self. I would catch myself forgetting my name, forgetting my chapter, forgetting why I was here. I would wake from sleep not knowing if minutes or years had passed. I would speak aloud just to hear a voice, even my own, and the sound would be so foreign that I would not recognize it. I began to see things that were not there, shadows that moved in the unchanging light, figures standing in the corners of the cell, faces appearing in the texture of the walls. I knew they were hallucinations, products of a mind starved for input, but knowing did not make them less real. I would watch them for hours, tracking their movements, trying to understand what they wanted, why they were there. And sometimes I would talk to them, carrying on conversations with phantoms, debating theology with shadows, seeking counsel from visions that could offer nothing but my own thoughts reflected back at me. I thought about killing myself. It would have been easy. I could have torn apart the sleeping platform and fashioned a weapon from the debris. I could have used my own strength to break my neck or collapse my windpipe. I could have simply stopped eating and let starvation take me. But suicide is a sin in the eyes of the Emperor. It is a rejection of the gift of life he has granted, a betrayal of the duty we owe to humanity. And even if I no longer believed I would ever be free, I could not bring myself to commit that final heresy. So I endured. I survived. I waited, because waiting was all I had left. And then, after what might have been decades or might have been centuries, the door opened. Not for interrogation, not for execution, but for transfer. They did not explain where I was being taken or why. They simply shackled me again, loaded me onto a transport, and moved me to another facility. This one was different. It was a Death Watch fortress, a place where space marines from different chapters were seconded to serve the Inquisition, hunting Xenos and heretics across the galaxy. I was not given armor. I was not given weapons. I was given a servitor's robe and assigned to menial labor, cleaning corridors, maintaining equipment, performing tasks that did not require thought or skill. I was a space marine, a warrior worth more than armies, reduced to the status of a janitor. I served in that capacity for years. I do not know how many. Time had lost all meaning by then. I worked alongside servitors and penal legionnaires, men who had been lobotomized or convicted of crimes and pressed into service. We did not speak. We were not permitted to speak. We simply worked, following orders, completing tasks, existing as extensions of the machinery we maintained. And I was grateful, because work was structure. Work was purpose. Work was something to do that was not staring at walls or fighting hallucinations or slowly losing my mind. I watched the Deathwatch warriors come and go. I saw them prepare for missions, saw them return victorious or wounded or not at all. I saw the camaraderie they shared, the bonds forged through combat, the pride they took in their service. And I remembered what it had been like to be one of them, to stand among brothers, to fight for something greater than myself, to matter. And the memory was more painful than any torture the Inquisition had inflicted because it reminded me of everything I had lost and would never have again. But I did not despair. I could not afford to despair. Despair is a weapon of chaos, a path to corruption, a surrender of faith. And if I gave in to despair, then the Inquisition would have been right. I would have been tainted, broken, turned into something less than human. So I worked, I endured, I maintained my faith, and I waited, because even though I no longer believed I would ever be free, I refused to accept that my story ended in a servitor's robe, forgotten and unmourned. The Indomitus Crusade changed everything. Robert Guilliman, my Primarch, had returned. The Emperor's son had risen from his stasis chamber and taken command of the Imperium, launching a crusade to reclaim worlds lost to chaos and Xenos, to rebuild the shattered remnants of humanity's empire. And with him came the Primaris Marines, a new generation of Space Marines created from enhanced gene seed, stronger, faster, more resilient than those who had come before. The Imperium needed warriors, and in times of desperate need, even the Inquisition's prisoners could be reconsidered. I was given a choice, not freedom. The Inquisition does not grant freedom, but an opportunity. I could cross the Rubicon Primaris, undergo the dangerous augmentation process that would transform me from a firstborn Space Marine into a Primaris Marine. The procedure had a high failure rate. Many who attempted it died on the operating table, their bodies unable to withstand the trauma of the transformation. But if I survived, I would be returned to active duty, reassigned to the Ultramarines, given a chance to serve again. It was not redemption. It was not forgiveness. It was simply pragmatism. The Imperium needed soldiers more than it needed to punish me. I accepted, not because I believed I deserved another chance, but because the alternative was to remain in servitude until my body finally gave out, to die in obscurity, to be forgotten by history and by the chapter one had given everything to serve. The transformation was agony. They cut me open and implanted new organs, new gene seed, new augmentations that pushed my body beyond its limits. I felt every incision, every modification, every moment of the process. And I welcomed the pain because pain meant I was still alive, still capable of feeling, still human enough to suffer. I survived. The odds had been against me. The procedure should have killed me, but my body adapted. My gene seed accepted the enhancements. And when I woke on the operating table, I was no longer the captain I had been. I was taller, stronger, faster. My armor had been replaced with Mark X Tacticus plate, my weapons upgraded to the newest patterns. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. Someone who resembled Demetrian Titus but was not the same man. Someone who had been broken down and rebuilt. Someone who carried 2 centuries of torture and isolation in his eyes. They assigned me to a squad, not as a captain, not as a leader, as a regular battle brother, serving under a lieutenant named Titus who had never heard of me, who knew nothing of my past, who saw me only as another Primaris Marine reforged by the Rubicon. I did not correct him. I did not tell him who I had been. Because that man was dead. The captain who had saved Greya, who had fought Nemeroth, who had believed the system would vindicate him, no longer existed. I was someone new, someone forged by suffering, someone who understood that the Imperium does not reward heroism, consumes it. I fought, I served, I killed in the Emperor's name. I followed orders without question, performed my duties without complaint, maintained discipline and focus and all the qualities expected of a space marine. But something had changed. I no longer felt the certainty I had once possessed. I no longer believed without doubt. I questioned, not openly, not in ways that would attract attention. But internally, I asked myself whether the Imperium I was fighting for was worth the cost, whether the Emperor would approve of what had been done to me, whether faith alone was enough to justify the atrocities committed in its name. I watched my battle brothers, young warriors who had never known anything except war, who believed in the righteousness of their cause with the fervor of those who had never been betrayed by it. And I envied them. I envied their certainty, their conviction, their ability to see the galaxy in simple terms of loyal and traitor, human and Xenos, faithful and heretic. I had once been like them, but 2 centuries of imprisonment had taught me that the lines were not so clear, that the Imperium was capable of monstrous acts in the name of preservation, that sometimes the difference between hero and heretic was nothing more than politics and perspective. I became a good soldier, not a great one, not a captain, but competent, reliable, effective. I followed orders. I completed missions. I survived when others did not. And slowly, over campaigns and battles and years of service, I began to rebuild something that resembled a life. Not the life I had lost. That was gone forever. But something new, something defined not by what I had been, but by what I had endured and what I had learned. The whispers followed me. My battle brothers did not know my full history, but they knew something was wrong. They saw the way I hesitated before following orders that should have been automatic. They noticed how I questioned strategies that others accepted without thought. They sensed that I was different, that I carried something with me that set me apart, that made me dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with combat prowess. Some avoided me. Some watched me with suspicion. Some tried to befriend me, to draw me out, to understand what had happened to make me the way I was. I pushed them all away, because attachment was a weakness I could no longer afford. I am Demetrian Titus. I am a space marine of the Ultramarines chapter. I have served the Emperor for over 2 centuries. I have fought in campaigns across the galaxy. I have killed more enemies than I can count. I have saved worlds and watched worlds burn. I have been a hero and a prisoner, and now I am something in between. I am a warrior who knows that victory is not the same as righteousness, that survival is not the same as success, that faith is not the same as truth. I carry scars that cannot be seen, wounds that will never heal, memories of darkness that no amount of light can erase. They call me Titus. They do not call me captain anymore. That rank was stripped from me along with everything else. And I do not ask for it back, because I have learned that titles do not define you. Actions do. And my actions will speak louder than any commendation or condemnation the Imperium could issue. I will fight. I will serve. I will protect humanity from the threats that seek to destroy it. Not because I believe the Imperium is perfect, but because I believe humanity deserves to survive. And if my suffering, my sacrifice, my 2 centuries of torture can contribute to that survival, then perhaps it was not meaningless. Perhaps it was simply the price that had to be paid. The question everyone asks is whether I am tainted, whether the touch of chaos corrupted me in ways too subtle to detect, whether my resistance was genuine or simply a deeper form of deception. The Inquisition never found proof, but they never stopped suspecting, and that suspicion follows me like a shadow, coloring every interaction, every mission, every moment of service. My battle brothers wonder. My commanders wonder. I wonder, because doubt is a seed that once planted cannot be fully removed. And the Inquisition planted that seed deep. But I know the truth. I know that I touched chaos and remained pure. I know that my faith held. I know that the Emperor protected me even when his own Imperium abandoned me. And I know that surviving that experience, enduring 2 centuries of punishment for it, has made me stronger in ways the Inquisition could never understand. I am not tainted. I am tested. I am forged in fire. I am a weapon sharpened by suffering. And I will use that weapon in service of humanity for as long as I draw breath. This is who Titus is in Warhammer 40K. Not a hero, not a villain, but a survivor. A warrior who paid the highest price for doing the right thing, who lost everything for refusing to fall to chaos, who endured centuries of torture and emerged not broken but transformed. I am a reminder that the Imperium's greatest enemy is not always external. Sometimes it is internal. Sometimes it is the paranoia and fear that turn brothers against each other, that punish loyalty and reward conformity, that sacrifice individuals for the illusion of safety. I walk among my brothers again. I wear the armor of the Ultramarines. I carry the weapons of the Emperor. But I am not the same man who saved Graia. That man died in a cell beneath the ice. I am what remains. I am what 2 centuries of darkness could not destroy. I am Demetrian Titus, and my story is far from over.